Hey everyone, welcome back to Jillian On Love. So today I want to talk about some very specific patterns when it comes to a relationship and how and why it leads to destruction in a relationship and what you can do about it. And I wrote my book, It Begins With You, The 9 Hard Truths About Love That Can Change Your Life, because my most important message is that if we want to change something in our relationship, regardless of what that relationship, the nature of that relationship is, we actually have to look within and see how we change our response and our reaction to whatever it is that's happening. And the number one relationship skill above anything else, in my view, is accountability. Now, I'm not talking about toxic relationships or abusive relationships at all today. Is it always a 50-50 split? When something is not working in a relationship, is it always a 50-50 split? No, sometimes there's one person who actually is more problematic. But this is for those of you who want to understand patterns. And the thing is that if a relationship is actually going to thrive, meaning, and in my definition of thriving, there is total emotional safety and there's still passion, then when there are problems, you have to see what the pattern is. And what I mean by problem is that most couples have the same fight over and over again. It might be cloaked differently. There might be a different metaphor. The metaphor might be the dishes. The metaphor might be in-laws, but it's the same fight over and over again. And so whether you are single or heartbroken or in a relationship, this episode is absolutely for you because I'm going to talk about some things when it comes to dating, but not only that, your greatest leverage as someone who is not in a relationship but one day wants to be is that you get the tools now. You don't wait until you're in the relationship. And that's the thing that I feel so passionate about helping people do, which is don't wait until you're in the relationship. Get as much information about what makes a relationship work and about yourself and your own particular patterns before you get into the relationship. When I say it begins with you, it really truly begins with you. So let me give you an example. I'll never forget when I was married and my 2-year marriage many, many years ago, it's over 12 years, about 12 years ago, so was just a mess in so many ways. If you want to learn more about it, you can read about it in my book, but it was such a mess in so many ways. And when we went to couples therapy, it was like, I knew we were going to couples therapy so that he could fix me. And I thought he was just the problem. And what happens so often is that when people go into couples counseling, they already feel so victimized. And again, I'm not talking about abusive, severely toxic relationships today, but I am talking about relationships that have gone down has gone to the dark side in terms of becoming unhealthy, or they're an unhealthy dynamic. Most of the time when people reach couples counseling, they feel they're in a state of learned helplessness where they think there is just no way out, that the state of their relationship is a state that is always going to continue. And so people aren't really going to couples work or doing couples counseling, couples coaching, couples therapy, however you want to describe it. People aren't going into this with the mindset of, we can do this, we can fix this. It's not positive. It's a negative mindset that is weakened with feeling just so powerless, right? And when I say feeling so victimized, that's what I mean. This powerlessness, this helplessness, and this belief that nothing can change. And that if anything were to change in the relationship, it's only going to be because we have to fix the other. And the truth is, by us changing how we approach the relationship and by us having the willingness to self-reflect on our own behavior and our own lack of skill, that is when things change. Because the number one rule that you have to understand is that you cannot change another person, but you can change yourself. And what I mean by change yourself, change your approach, change your beliefs, change the way that you communicate. You can change yourself, and an overwhelmingly majority of the time when you do that, you influence the other. And if you don't, then you know. Then you have your answer about whether or not it's the right relationship for you. But oftentimes, what people are doing is, I will make a change once they change. When they make me feel better, I'll do something differently. And I want to empower all of you to actually say, you know what, I'm going to do things differently. So let's start with the first principle of what I mean by this. It starts with I am. In all ancient spiritual texts, I am, and I put that in quotation marks, is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful thing a person could ever say. Because what you say after that is who you become. And what you say after that becomes your destiny. It becomes your life. So in ancient spiritual texts, all of them, of all religions, all spiritualities, all ancient spiritual texts have some iteration of I am. And what comes after that, what they want people to say is, I am God, I am light, I am, infinite intelligence. Because that is the belief of all spiritual, anything that is spiritual or religious in nature, when you get down to the deeper meanings behind it, is that everyone has the universe, God, light, goodness inside of them. But the moment you start to say, I am this or I am that, what happens is we then identify with that. That's what happens. What I'm seeing now in relationships and in the dating world, which is a really big mistake, is I am anxious, or I am anxious attachment. I am the avoidant. I am always going to be single. I am not enough. It's incredibly disempowering. And I feel incredibly passionate about getting people to stop doing that. You see, when you bring mindfulness into your life and mindfulness into your relationship life, what you will start to notice and recognize and put into practice is that if you consider yourself to have an anxious attachment style, that is only one part of you, and it is not fixed. Because your anxious attachment style could be because your mom just died, or could be because you have been in relationships with avoidance, right? When you say, I am an avoidant, no, you're not an avoidant. Are you an avoidant in every aspect of your life? So when you're at work, are you an avoidant? When you're dealing with family, are you an avoidant? Are you an avoidant with your best friend? No, you struggle with avoidance in relationships because of your childhood conditioning. But it is not who you are. It is something that you struggle with, particularly in romantic relationships, because that is where we are most vulnerable. And that is where we are most uncertain, is in our romantic relationships, because no one is obligated to stay in a relationship with us or to love us. And it's also where we are stripped naked, metaphorically and literally, with a person. So we are our most vulnerable, and no one is immune to that. So our childhood wounding and our attachment wounding is going to come up way more in a romantic relationship than it is in a friendship, because we are confronted with this level of vulnerability. This episode is sponsored by GEM. 90% of Americans are nutrient deficient. That's a shocking number. GEM is the first real food multivitamin formulated with ingredients our bodies were built to absorb and free from synthetic ingredients. Here's the deal. Most of the supplements you're taking often far exceed the necessary quantities of vitamins your body actually needs on a daily basis. GEM was designed, quote unquote, deficiency first to fill your nutritional gaps without the excess ingredients that inevitably turn into waste in the body. GEM is on a mission to make food as medicine real through bite-sized nutrition solutions that are simple and really easy to digest. If you want to give the first real food multivitamin a try, head to dailygem.com/JOL or enter JOL at checkout for 30% off your first order. That's dailygem.com/JOL or enter JOL at checkout for 30% off. But it is not who you are. It is something you struggle with. And the problem that I'm seeing, I'll just bring this back to dating. I'm seeing hearing about this from people who say, oh yeah, I went on this date and they told me they're an avoidant. And we're talking about attachment styles. You immediately limit yourself when you say that. And you immediately make the other person nervous. Oh, I'm anxious or I'm avoidant. And actually you are selling yourself short because you are buying into that identity. And what you are basically saying is, this is who I am. I'm not changing, so you better be okay with that. Instead of, this is what I tend to struggle with, not all the time. This is what I'm working on. I want you to know because this is what I'm working on. And this is something that is a sore spot for me or a vulnerability for me. That is very, very different. It is not just semantics. It is very different because if you are going in the dating world, or you're going into the relationship world attached to, oh, I have anxious attachment or I am avoidant, guess what? You are actually going to behave like that because anything that we say after I am a codependent, that is who we become. And look, I know that it helps to put some context around it, but particularly when it comes to relational labels like avoidance, anxious, codependence, it is so incredibly off the mark because it's fluid. It's not fixed. But the moment that you identify with it, it becomes fixed in your nature. And mindfulness is being able to say, who else am I? What else are they? And if I were to get very curious about this diagnosis that I am declaring to everyone, what might I discover about it that isn't what I initially think is actually true? So please, if you are dating or if you are just describing yourself relationally, whether you're in a relationship or not, do not stop saying, I am avoidant or I'm a codependent or I am this, and replace it with, this is sometimes something that I struggle with. This is a pattern that I sometimes have in reaction to something else. Or I was raised in this particular childhood. I noticed that how it comes out in romantic relationships is this, but it's something that I'm working on. Because another thing that happens on an unconscious level, whether you're meeting someone who says this to you or you're saying it yourself, is the moment you say, I am this, you are basically saying, you can't change me, and I don't want to change. Your attachment style is not fixed. It is a tendency that is determined by who you are relating to. And it is something healable because it's not actually a disease and it's not actually a pathology. It is something that you can heal, but you cannot heal it. Here's the irony, Or here's the paradox. You cannot heal it when you identify so strongly with it. So you have to make sure that when it comes to your relationships, that you are not disempowering yourself. And that you understand that relationships are far more nuanced than that. Way, way, way more nuanced than that. And way more contextual than that. That said, and I'll get to my next point, point number 2 is, if you're in a relationship or you've been in relationships that are struggling, that have struggled, that haven't worked, what you have to be able to do is to identify the pattern that the two of you are in. In fact, the most mindful, aware, wisest person in the room when it comes to their relationship is the person who can see the dynamic. Oftentimes, the most common dynamic is there's a pursuer and then there's a distancer. Now, is it true that one person might find that their pattern is to more often be the pursuer in relationships than the distancer? Like you maybe have more anxiety. The other person has just as much anxiety, but they are dealing with it differently. But that said, you could find yourself as the distancer too. In fact, oftentimes those roles are reversed. So this is what it looks like. The more you pursue in a relationship, meaning, I have to fix this, we need to talk about this right now, what's wrong with you, why can't you change? It can look like all those different things. The more the other person is going to want to distance. And the more you distance yourself, the more your MO is to maybe like pull away at the first sign of strife, the more you are going to instigate the person who you're in a relationship with, who maybe wants to fix things, to pursue you. And again, oftentimes, in fact, more times than not, I see these roles being switched often throughout the course of a person's relationship. So that actually challenges this notion of the anxious avoidant dance that everyone is in this fixed role. No, it's often a dynamic that's happening where there is a switching of roles. And what two people are doing is that they're dancing around intimacy because they don't know actually how to be vulnerable, how to communicate, and how to surrender to the higher purpose of a relationship, which is unconditional love. And when I say unconditional, I'm not talking about, you tolerate less than you deserve. But ultimately, what we are trying to do in a relationship, and when both people are doing this, this is what creates magic in a relationship, is you're trying to create a relationship that has boundaries, but has so much love, so much acceptance, so much, they give each other so much freedom to be who they are, not the same thing as tolerating BS. And that's what creates a lot of love. This episode is sponsored by Masterclass. I believe in the power of mentorship. I love to learn. I'm pretty sure most of you are, if not all of you, are voracious learners too. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best, literally to become your best. It is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 of the world's best. And for just $10 a month billed annually, a membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every instructor. I learned to make the best eggs I've ever made and the best eggs that my friends have ever had. And you think that's easy, but actually it's not. Right now, our listeners get an additional 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/JOL. That's 15% off at masterclass.com/JOL. masterclass.com/JOL. So the pursuer and the distancer, everyone has a reactive behavioral pattern that and most of us have many, but one that we go to more regularly when we are triggered inside of a relationship. So some people see red and they get angry and they want to fight. Okay? Some people, they just want to fix everything. They want to keep the peace. The idea that something could be wrong is so threatening to them that they want to actually just fix. Some people flee, they run away. So people have different, and there's different iterations of this inside of a relationship. Like the fleer might be the one who gives the silent treatment or shuts down. The fighter might be the one who yells or is really cold and resentful. The fixer might be the one who just wants to communicate a lot, or maybe the one who is the people pleaser, right? So there's different shades, different flavors to all of these reactive patterns, but they are the most prevalent. And what do all three have in common? All three of them are trying to regain certainty after feeling incredibly uncertain. Whenever you get really angry, you're getting really angry because you feel completely out of control and you feel unimportant. So in order to regain control, which is a sense of certainty, and to regain a sense of power, feeling important again, feeling relevant again, you're going to get angry. The person who flees also feels incredibly uncertain. Their method of regaining certainty is to get away. That's their safety. That's how they reclaim their certainty. The fixer is also responding or reacting to feeling out of control. And fixing is their way of reclaiming certainty. So whether you are pursuing, distancing, fighting, shutting down, fleeing, people-pleasing, fixing, everything is a reaction to feeling out of control. Everything is a reaction to uncertainty, and it is your unconscious reaction, your unconscious response to regain certainty again. Another way of thinking of certainty is safety. When you bring mindfulness and self-awareness into your relational dynamics, you will then start to notice that when you are getting triggered and you're starting to go into your reaction, that what is really happening beneath the surface is you feel out of control. Now, what must we be doing when we feel out of control instead of doing all the dances, the dysfunctional dances that we do? Well, typically, if you're someone who goes into fighting mode, that's your time to get very vulnerable. So you have to do the exact opposite. You have to take, first of all, some deep breaths and maybe take a brief walk so that you can literally cool down. And then you have to get vulnerable, because the person who is always angry is trying to protect themselves from vulnerability. And that is the uncertainty that they are facing. If you are someone who tends to want to flee for safety, you want to run away, you don't want to deal, you want to avoid, you want to, or for some of you, it's just, you want to just sweep things under the rug. Your job, your task is to lean into that, to lean into this, into the discomfort, and to be still and to lean into the conversation. Now, what if you're a fixer? Well, I'm going to say something that I think is going to be a little taboo. I actually believe that being a fixer in a relationship is one of the better things you can be. I think that if you're in a relationship with a fixer, you're very lucky, because fixers want things to be resolved. And it is much better to be in a relationship with someone who wants things to be resolved than someone who is fighting and who's fleeing. However, where fixing becomes a problem is, number one, if they're trying to fix you, because you cannot fix your partner, and you should not be in a relationship with someone who you believe needs to reform. And it also becomes a problem when you are fixing to the detriment of your own boundaries. So you go into people-pleasing mode, and then you're not ever speaking up in your relationship. So you would rather just things be fixed without you actually speaking your truth. So for you, you want to continue to lean into your solutions-focused mentality, because I do think that's really good, but not at the detriment of your boundaries. So you have to learn how to stick up for yourself, because where the fixer can become really problematic is if they go more into like a fawn response, which is like part of fight or flight, but it's the, okay, everything's okay, don't worry about it, everything's gonna be fine, let's just keep the peace, it's okay. And then inside, what's happening is that they're not sticking up for themselves. So that very person becomes resentful. And sooner or later, that fixer is going to become the fleer or the fighter. They're going to shut down, or they're going to get really angry. So you can see how when we don't address these patterns inside ourselves, we can morph into these other reactive patterns, and then things get really, really sticky and tricky in a relationship. Because then you're trying to sort of decode what the pattern is. It's like, well, I'm fighting, but that's really because I was fawning for so long and pleasing, and now I'm resentful. And then you see how it starts to stack one on top of the other, and it becomes very complicated. So you have to ask yourself, without saying I am, you don't say I am the fleer. You do not say I am the avoider. You do not say I am the fixer in relationships. You say, I have a tendency to. My pattern is to. And you can say, my pattern is to be totally a fixer. Here are the ways in which it's actually benefited my relationships and benefited maybe my work life and other aspects of my life. This is how it is not helping me. And this is where it goes too far. And then when I keep doing it, then I end up becoming resentful. And then I end up yelling because there's a pressure cooker building inside of me. And then I say nothing for months, and then it all explodes, and I just burn the house down with my terrible mood. So you have to know, if you're in a relationship right now and struggling, or you're reflecting on a past relationship, or maybe you're reflecting on a different kind of relationship that's not romantic, what is your pattern? What is the thing that you do? This episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. Rocket Money is genius. It's a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. And I can guarantee you are throwing money out the window on subscriptions that you forgot about, because that is the case for pretty much all of us. In fact, I just learned 85% of people have at least one paid subscription going unused each month. Thanks to Rocket Money, though, I can see all my subscriptions in one place and cancel the ones I'm not using anymore. And now I'm saving more money and not wasting money. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and have saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/onlove today. That's rocketmoney.com/onlove. rocketmoney.com/onlove. Now, if you're looking at this through the lens of being a couple and you're struggling, who right now is the pursuer and who is the distancer? And what actually is happening has there been a lot of criticism? If you are someone who does more of the pursuing, have you been trying to get your partner to change by being angry at them all the time? Have you been trying to get them to change or to be more present with you or to love you more, to meet more of your needs by pointing out to everything that they're doing wrong or only focusing on what they're doing wrong? Are you doing it by complaining? Because these are the things that we do when we are in pursuing mode that turns another person, even if they're not typically a distancer, into a distancer. We can make someone into a avoider if that's how we're approaching it. If you're the distancer, are you at the first sign of strife just pulling away? Are you getting too defensive? Are you unable to take any piece of feedback? Do you see your partner's unhappiness as your responsibility, and then therefore you feel like, well, then I can never make them happy, so I'm going to shut down? These are all the stories that we have in our heads. There's a chapter in my book called The Mind is a Battlefield. So you have to, when you are in a relationship, you have to be able to recognize when your mind is a battlefield and you're creating all these stories, and then to notice what is the thing that you are doing to reclaim your certainty and your safety that is feeding into a pattern, a dynamic that's not working. And then you have to do the exact opposite. But it's going to be very hard for you to break the pattern if you are convinced that this is who you are. So this is how it all ties into the initial point, which is be very mindful and careful of what you say after I am. My suggestion to you is, if you are someone who's distancing, you need to close the gap. If you are the person who is pursuing, you need to figure out how you are pursuing, and if you're doing it with a lot of complaining and a lot of focusing on what's not right and a lot of demanding. Every dynamic in a relationship is, when this happens, then I do this, and then when I do this, you do this, and when you do this, I do this. And where couples where we get it very wrong is we get in the blame game. We get stuck in the blame game. And we think, well, if you just stop doing this, I would stop doing that. And this is why so many people break up, and why couples therapy often does not work for a lot of people, because there's no one holding them accountable to see the dance. And because the blame game never works. All you can do is recognize your contribution to the dynamic that's happening by bringing radical self-awareness and honesty to your conversation with yourself, and change the way that you are behaving. Break your pattern without them having to change anything. Because when you change, you immediately change the dynamic. You will have to have many conversations about this. But oftentimes, what I see over and over again is that you will start to get your needs met better once you break the cycle within. This episode is sponsored by O Positive. O Positive is a women's health company. They offer a range of symptom-targeting supplements that support women at every stage of life, from their first period to well beyond their last. And they have a best-selling product called Uro Vaginal Probiotics, and it's one of the top 5 supplements on Amazon. And they have multiple #1 products in Target for intimate care, PMS, and menopause categories. What makes them so special? They create real, tangible results with ingredients that are backed by clinical studies and shaped by board-certified doctors. Many factors throw off vaginal flora: sex, tight clothing, sweat from working out, hormones, periods. All of that can disrupt vaginal health and create an imbalance. And Vaginal Probiotic is a blend of 4 powerful strains backed by research showing that these strains support vaginal health. So take proactive care of your health and head to opositive.com/JOL or enter JOL at checkout for 25% off your first purchase. That's opositive.com/JOL for 25% off. So what is the healthy way to do things? In every relationship that I have ever known or any couple I've ever worked with where they are struggling, there is 100% of the time an appreciation deficit, meaning they have forgotten one or both partners. And it's usually both, but it could be one more than the other. It's never like a 50-50 split. Where they've forgotten that the person who they're with is special and that they are taking each other for granted. And the thing is, and I've said this before, the way in which human beings and dogs are very, very similar is that we respond to positive reinforcement and we cower and flee when it comes to negative reinforcement. In fact, studies have proven that in schools, the students who excel are not always the ones who are the brightest. They're the ones who have teachers who believe in them. And then the students who fail are not necessarily failing because they are not as intelligent. They are failing because they have not been positively reinforced and they don't have a teacher that believes in them. So when we have people who see our light, who see our genius, it is human nature to be inspired to rise to our potential. But the moment someone is trying to make us into someone we're not because how we are presenting ourselves is not good enough, or the more that we are being punished, the less we change. And so the best way to change another is to change yourself. Of course, for some of you, there might be, well, I've done that and they're not changing. Well, then you need to really think about if you are in the right relationship. But that does not negate the theory and the argument that it still begins with you. There is no other way around it. There is no other strategy. It has to start with you, just like it has to start with me. To recap, remember, what you put after I am is actually who you become. Attachment styles are not fixed, they're fluid, they're contextual, and they're relational. So please don't be dating right now and saying, oh, I'm an avoidant, or I'm this, or I'm that. You should be looking in the mirror and being like, hell no, this is not going to be my destiny. I'm going to change this. This is just one thing that I happen to struggle with. Figure out what dynamic you're in right now in a relationship. Who is being the pursuer? Who's being the distancer? What happens when you switch roles? How does it tie into the same argument or fight that you keep having over and over again? What is the pattern? What is your reactive behavioral pattern? What do you do when you feel out of control? Do you go to anger? Do you go to fixing? Do you go to fleeing? What do you go to first? Do you go to fixing and then you become a fleer and then you become a fighter? What's your pattern? How can you change it? Do the opposite. If you're a fighter, become vulnerable. If you are a fleer, you need to lean in. If you are a fixer, you might mean that you have to actually stick up for yourself and risk the situation not being fixed right away, because you have to be able to speak your truth inside of a relationship so that you don't become the fighter. There is the appreciation deficiency. We do not respond to negative reinforcement. No one has ever been motivated to change or to step up into their purpose or their potential with punishment. We only do it with positive reinforcement. And when we believe in someone, when we love someone, when we show them, this 2 words that are incredibly impactful in a relationship: thank you. And here's the thing, most couples stop being polite with each other because they get so used to each other. But the strongest relationships, they are saying thank you. They have manners and they recognize their mindfulness allows them to be able to discover things in their partner or pick up things in their partner when their partner is really trying to do better. So the key really is we have to stop the blame game. And if we really, really believe that the person that we are dating or in a relationship with is truly problematic, we got to get out. But if you can say, if I'm really honest with myself, I have taken no accountability here, I have not looked within, then we are talking about a different story. But you got to get on this as soon as possible, because when you leave the pattern going on too long, when you don't take responsibility, when you don't work on yourself inside of the relationship, which is really just working on your reaction to feeling out of control and your triggers, and things get very complex very quickly, and it can be very hard to untangle, but not impossible, but it does start with you. So that's it for this week's episode of Jillian on Love. If you're in couples therapy, bring this to your couples therapist, or listen to this with your significant other, or just, this was meant to be a thought-provoking episode. I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts. Me and my team, we read all your emails, so please reach out to us at hello@jillianonlove.com. And if there's anything that I talk about that you really want me to go deeper into, let me know and I will do it. Thank you for listening, and until next time. Oh, and by the way, if you want to hear me answer people's questions really in depth, or you want to hear me go into deeper into certain things, like I just recently did a whole analysis of White Lotus, then you must be a subscriber to Jillian on Love Plus. It is a very, very small fee, but you just get extras and essentially more Jillian on Love. Until next time, thanks for listening. Jillian on Love is a QCODE production, executive produced by David Henning and Steve Wilson, produced and edited by Travis Howe, music by Will Tendy.